That horse will kill you before sunset. Marcus Blackwood's voice was cold as steel as he watched the young woman from New York walk toward the corral. What he didn't know was that by sunset, everything he believed about strength, weakness, and what it truly means to be broken would be shattered forever. The morning sun painted the Montana sky in shades of amber and rose as a yellow taxi pulled up to the gates of Blackwood Ranch. The driver looked at his passenger through the rearview mirror with a mixture of pity and amusement. "You sure this is the right place, miss?" he asked, eyeing her designer luggage and impractical heels. "This ain't exactly the Hamptons." Olivia Chen stepped out of the taxi, her Louboutin heels immediately sinking into the dusty gravel. She was 27 years old, with delicate features that spoke of her Chinese-American heritage, manicured nails that had never seen a day of manual labor, and a Chanel bag that cost more than most ranch hands made in 3 months. "I'm exactly where I need to be," she replied, though her voice wavered slightly as she took in the vast expanse of land stretching endlessly toward snow-capped mountains. The driver shrugged, unloaded her 3 matching Louis Vuitton suitcases, and drove away, leaving Olivia standing alone in a cloud of dust. She coughed, wiped her face with a silk handkerchief, and squared her shoulders. This was her new beginning. Her escape. Her chance to prove that Olivia Chen was more than just a pretty face who had married well and divorced badly. "You must be the new hire." The voice came from behind her, deep and rough like gravel. She turned to find a man who looked like he had been carved from the mountains themselves. Marcus Blackwood was 43 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair, a jaw that seemed permanently clenched, and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore faded jeans, a work shirt with rolled-up sleeves revealing forearms corded with muscle, and boots that had seen decades of honest work. He was also, according to Forbes magazine, worth approximately $470 million. "Mr. Blackwood." Olivia extended her hand. "I'm Olivia Chen. I applied for the ranch management assistant position." Marcus looked at her hand like it was a foreign object. Then he looked at her heels. Then at her luggage. Then back at her face. "Is this a joke?" he asked. "Excuse me? Did my sister send you? Some kind of prank?" Marcus crossed his arms over his chest. "Because I asked for someone with experience. Someone who knows horses. Someone who can actually survive out here." Olivia felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she refused to look away. "I have a master's degree in business administration from Columbia. I managed a $15 million portfolio at Goldman Sachs before I was 25. I have organizational skills that would make your head spin, and I learn faster than anyone you've ever met. Can you ride a horse? I took lessons at an equestrian club in Connecticut." Marcus laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. "An equestrian club? Let me guess, you wore a cute little helmet and joppers while someone led a gentle mare around an arena? I fail to see how that's relevant to ranch management. Lady, this is a working ranch. We have 3,000 head of cattle, 47 horses, 22 employees, and 65,000 acres of land. This isn't some hobby farm where rich people play cowboy on weekends." He stepped closer, and Olivia caught the scent of leather and sage. "My assistant needs to be on horseback at dawn, ride fences all day, handle emergencies, and earn the respect of men who have been doing this for 40 years. What part of your Goldman Sachs experience prepared you for that?" Olivia wanted to run. Every instinct screamed at her to call another taxi, fly back to New York, and admit that this whole idea had been a mistake born of desperation and heartbreak, but she had nowhere to go back to. "I have 30 days. She said quietly. "What?" "The contract I signed said there's a 30-day trial period. Give me 30 days. If I can't do the job, I'll leave without a word. But if I prove you wrong..." She paused, lifting her chin. "You'll double my salary and apologize for every condescending word you've said in the last 5 minutes." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Something flickered in those storm-gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps. Or maybe just curiosity about how long it would take for her to break. "Fine," he said finally. 30 days. But you start now. Go to the bunkhouse, find Rosa, get proper clothes. You'll be mucking stalls until dinner." "Mucking stalls?" "Shoveling horse manure." he clarified with grim satisfaction. Welcome to Montana, city girl. Olivia's first week was a masterclass in humiliation. Rosa Gutierrez, the ranch's head housekeeper and unofficial mother figure to everyone on the property, took one look at Olivia's luggage and burst out laughing. Mija, she said, wiping tears from her eyes. Did you pack for a fashion show or a job? But unlike Marcus, there was warmth in Rosa's teasing. She found Olivia proper boots, jeans, and work shirts. She showed her where the bunkhouse was, though Olivia refused to stay there, instead insisting on the small cabin reserved for the management assistant. That cabin hasn't been used in 2 years. Rosa warned. Not since what? Rosa's smile faded. Since Marcus's wife left. She was the last one to live there. Olivia learned quickly that there were many things no one talked about at Blackwood Ranch. Marcus's wife, Elena, who had left him 3 years ago. The accident that had killed his younger brother, James. And the horse. Most of all, no one talked about the horse. His name was Midnight Storm, and he was kept in a separate paddock far from the other horses. 17 hands of pure black muscle and fury, with eyes that held something more than animal instinct. Something that looked almost like hatred. Don't go near that one. Jake Morrison, the ranch foreman, warned Olivia on her 3rd day. Jake was a weathered man in his 60s who had worked at Blackwood Ranch since Marcus was a boy. That horse has killed 1 man and crippled 2 others. Why keep him then? Olivia asked, watching the stallion pace his paddock like a caged panther. Jake's face grew somber. He belonged to James, Marcus's brother. After the accident, Marcus couldn't bring himself to put him down. But he can't let him go either. That horse is a reminder of everything Marcus lost. What happened? The accident? Jake shook his head. That's not my story to tell, miss. And if you're smart, you won't ask Marcus about it. But Olivia was curious by nature. It was what had made her successful on Wall Street and what had ultimately destroyed her marriage. Her ex-husband, David, used to say that she asked too many questions, dug too deep, could never leave well enough alone. Maybe that's why she found herself walking toward Midnight Storm's paddock later that evening. When most of the ranch hands had gone to dinner, the stallion noticed her immediately. His ears flattened, and he snorted a warning, pawing at the ground. Easy, Olivia said softly, stopping at the fence. I'm not going to hurt you. The horse lunged toward the fence, and Olivia jumped back, her heart pounding. What the hell do you think you're doing? Marcus's voice cut through the evening air like a whip. He strode toward her, his face dark with fury. I was just looking, Olivia said defensively. Looking. He grabbed her arm and pulled her away from the paddock. That horse will rip your throat out if he gets the chance. Do you understand? He's not some pony you can pet and feed carrots to. Then why is he here? Olivia demanded, yanking her arm free. If he's so dangerous, why keep him? Marcus's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he might fire her on the spot. But instead, he just shook his head. Go back to your cabin, city girl. And stay away from things you don't understand. He walked away, and Olivia watched him go, more intrigued than ever. The next 2 weeks were a blur of exhaustion, sore muscles, and small victories. Olivia learned to wake before dawn, to drink coffee black because there was no time for cream and sugar, to fall into bed at night so tired that she couldn't dream. She mucked stalls until her arms ached, then learned to repair fences when Jake decided she needed more challenge. She fell off a horse 3 times before finally managing to stay on for an entire afternoon ride. The ranch hands, who had initially dismissed her as a joke, began to watch her with grudging respect. Not because she was good at the work. She wasn't. But because she never quit. That city girl has grit. She overheard one of them say. Thought she'd be gone after the first day. But she keeps getting up. Even Marcus seemed to soften slightly. He stopped calling her city girl to her face, though she suspected he still used the term behind her back. He answered her questions about ranch operations with actual information instead of dismissive grunts. Once, he even nodded approvingly when she correctly calculated feed costs for the next quarter, but through it all, Olivia couldn't stop thinking about Midnight Storm every evening. After dinner, she would walk to the far paddock and stand at the fence. She didn't try to approach the horse. She just watched. And something strange began to happen. At first, Midnight Storm would charge the fence whenever she appeared, ears flat, teeth bared. But after a few days, the charges became half-hearted. After a week, he would simply stand at the far end of the paddock, watching her watch him. "He's curious about you," Jake said one evening, finding her at the fence. "Never seen him do that with anyone else." "He seems sad," Olivia said. "Not just angry. Sad." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Animals grieve too, you know. James raised that horse from a foal. They were inseparable." "And then, what happened, Jake? Please tell me." The old foreman sighed, leaning against the fence. 3 years ago, there was a fire. Lightning strike in the barn. James went in to save the horses. Got most of them out. But Midnight Storm was trapped. James went back for him, and the roof collapsed." Olivia closed her eyes, imagining the horror. "Marcus was the one who found them," Jake continued. "James was gone, but the horse survived. Marcus got him out, got burned pretty bad himself in the process." He paused. "That's why he has those scars on his left arm. Never talks about it." "And Midnight Storm?" "The horse was never the same. Something broke in him that night. Watched his person die, couldn't understand why, couldn't grieve the way humans do. All that pain turned into rage." Jake shook his head. "Marcus keeps him because letting him go would mean admitting James is really gone. And the horse stays angry because that's the only way he knows how to survive." That night, Olivia couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about pain, about grief, about the ways trauma transforms us. She understood more than she'd admitted to anyone. Her own story wasn't so different. Not fire, but flames of a different kind. A marriage that had burned slowly for 5 years before finally collapsing. A husband who controlled every aspect of her life, who convinced her that she was worthless, who isolated her from friends and family until she had no one left. The day she finally left David, she had nothing but the clothes on her back and a credit card she'd hidden for emergencies. He had frozen their joint accounts, called her employers, told lies to everyone who would listen. That's how Olivia Chen, who had once been one of the youngest portfolio managers in Goldman Sachs history, ended up applying for a ranch assistant job in Montana. It was the only place far enough away, the only place David would never think to look. She was running from her own fire, and maybe, just maybe, she recognized something in Midnight Storm's eyes. A creature trapped in pain, lashing out at the world because it was the only thing that made sense. The next morning, Olivia made a decision. She woke 2 hours before dawn and walked to Midnight Storm's paddock. The horse was standing in the corner, a black shadow against the graying sky. "I know you hate everyone," she said softly, sitting down on the ground outside the fence. "I understand. I hate everyone too, sometimes." The horse's ears swiveled toward her, but he didn't move. "I'm going to come here every morning," she continued. "I'm not going to try to touch you or ride you or make you do anything. I'm just going to sit here. Because I think maybe you need someone who doesn't want anything from you. Someone who just sees you." She sat there for an hour, watching the sun rise over the mountains. When she finally stood to leave, she thought maybe, just maybe, the horse had moved a few steps closer. This became her routine every morning. 2 hours before anyone else woke, Olivia would sit outside Midnight Storm's paddock. Sometimes she talked. Sometimes she just breathed. Sometimes she read aloud from books she'd brought from New York, her voice soft and steady in the pre-dawn quiet. After a week, the horse would come to stand near the fence when she arrived. After 2 weeks, he stopped flattening his ears at her approach. After 3 weeks, he let her extend her hand through the fence, not touching him, just offering. On the 24th day, Midnight Storm touched his nose to her palm. Olivia cried. She didn't mean to, but the tears came anyway. It wasn't about the horse, not really. It was about everything. The years of feeling worthless, the months of running, the weeks of pushing her body beyond its limits just to prove she was more than what David had made her believe. "I see you," she whispered to the horse. I see who you really are. And the horse, impossibly, seemed to understand. That evening, Marcus found her at the paddock again. He had been watching her for days, though he hadn't admitted it to anyone. At first, he thought she was foolish. Then he thought she was suicidal. But now, watching her stand calmly while Midnight Storm ate an apple from her hand, he thought she might be something else entirely. How? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Olivia turned, surprised to see him. How what? How did you do that? He gestured at the horse. I've had trainers, specialists, even a horse whisperer from California. None of them could get within 10 feet of him without risking their lives. And you're feeding him apples like he's a puppy. I didn't do anything. Olivia said. I just showed up. Every day. And let him decide when he was ready. Marcus stepped closer, and Midnight Storm's ears went flat. The horse's eyes fixed on him with that familiar hatred. He still doesn't trust me, Marcus said, and there was such pain in his voice that Olivia's heart ached. My own brother's horse. I saved his life, and he still looks at me like I'm the enemy. Maybe that's the problem. Olivia said gently. You saved his life. But you couldn't save James. And every time he sees you, he remembers that. Marcus flinched as if she'd struck him. I'm sorry, she said quickly. That was too much. I shouldn't have, no. His voice was rough. You're right. You're exactly right. He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time, Olivia saw him as something other than the cold, controlling rancher. She saw a man still drowning in grief. I'd been so focused on keeping him alive that I never thought about what he was living for. He lost everything that mattered, and I just expected him to move on because I couldn't. Grief doesn't have a timeline, Olivia said. And it doesn't follow logic. Sometimes the only way through is to just be. To stop fighting and start feeling. Marcus looked at her with new eyes. You sound like you know something about that. Olivia hesitated. She hadn't told anyone at the ranch about her past. Hadn't mentioned David or the years of abuse or the divorce that had stripped her of everything, but something about this moment, about the way Marcus was looking at her with the walls finally down, made her want to be honest. I was married for 5 years. She said quietly. To a man who made me believe I was nothing. He controlled everything. What I wore, who I talked to, what I ate. By the end, I didn't recognize myself in the mirror. I had become exactly what he wanted me to be. Empty. Marcus said nothing, but his eyes softened. When I finally left, I had nowhere to go. No friends because he'd chased them all away. No family because I'd been too ashamed to admit what was happening. No money because he'd taken everything. She laughed bitterly. The irony is, I used to manage millions of dollars for other people. But I couldn't even keep $20 in a secret account. How did you end up here? I saw the job posting and thought, why not? What's the worst that could happen? I'd fail? She shrugged. I'd already failed at everything else. At least failing at ranching would be a new experience. You're not failing, Marcus said, and there was something almost like admiration in his voice. You're the first person in 25 years who's gotten Jake to compliment them. He told me you have promising potential, which in Jake language is basically a marriage proposal. Olivia laughed, genuine and surprised. And now this. Marcus gestured at Midnight Storm. You've done something no one else could do. You've reached him. I didn't reach him, Olivia corrected. I just gave him space to reach himself. There's a difference. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the horse graze peacefully in the fading light. Tomorrow is day 30. Marcus said finally. Olivia's heart sank. I know. You haven't asked about the apology. Or the salary increase. I haven't thought about it, she admitted. I've been too focused on. She gestured vaguely at everything. On what? On discovering that I might be more than what I thought I was. She met his eyes. On realizing that maybe failing at one thing doesn't mean you're a failure at everything. On learning that strength isn't about never falling down. It's about getting up every time you do. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something that surprised them both. He stepped closer and took her hand. Stay. He said. Not just for the job. Stay because I think maybe we're both learning things we needed to learn. And maybe we could learn them together. Olivia's breath caught. Marcus, I'm not I'm not asking for anything. He said quickly. Just, don't leave. Give this place a chance. Give yourself a chance. He paused. Give me a chance to be someone other than the cold rancher who made you shovel manure on your first day. She laughed despite herself. That was pretty bad. I know. I'm sorry. And there it was. The apology she demanded on day one. I'm sorry for underestimating you. I'm sorry for assuming you couldn't do this because of where you came from. I've spent so long protecting myself from disappointment that I forgot how to give people a chance. We're more alike than you think. Olivia said. Both running from grief. Both hiding behind walls. Maybe we could stop running. Marcus suggested. Maybe we could just stand still for a while. See what happens. Before Olivia could answer, Midnight Storm whinnied. They both turned to see the horse watching them, his ears forward, his posture relaxed. I think he approves. Olivia said. He's got good taste. The next morning marked a new chapter. Word spread quickly through the ranch that the city girl had done the impossible. She had befriended Midnight Storm. Ranch hands who had barely acknowledged her before now looked at her with genuine respect, but the real change was just beginning. Olivia had an idea. It was crazy, probably impossible, and would likely get her fired. But she couldn't shake it. I want to ride him. She told Marcus over breakfast. He choked on his coffee. Absolutely not. Marcus, that horse has killed a man. Crippled two others. He's not some challenge to conquer. I'm not trying to conquer him. Olivia said patiently. I'm trying to help him. He needs to remember what it felt like to be whole. To have a purpose. He's been stuck in that paddock for 3 years, with nothing but his grief. What kind of life is that? It's a safe life. Safe for who? She challenged. For him, or for you? Marcus slammed his hand on the table. You don't understand. If something happened to you, if he hurt you, then it would be my choice. Olivia said firmly. My risk to take. I'm not asking for your permission, Marcus. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. And if I say no? Then I'll do it anyway, and you can fire me. They stared at each other, neither willing to back down. Finally, Marcus sighed. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. I'll take that as a compliment. It wasn't meant as one. But there was the ghost of a smile on his face. Fine. But I'm going to be there. And Jake. And every ranch hand who knows first aid. If that horse so much as twitches wrong, deal. The next morning, at dawn, a crowd gathered at Midnight Storm's paddock. Word had spread, and everyone wanted to witness what was sure to be either a miracle or a disaster. Olivia entered the paddock alone, carrying only a bridle. No saddle. She wanted the horse to feel her, to know she wasn't hiding behind equipment. Midnight Storm watched her approach, his body tense but not hostile. Hey, boy. She said softly. I know this is scary. Change always is. But I'm not going to hurt you. And I'm not going to leave you. Whatever happens, we're in this together. She stood before him, the bridle hanging loose in her hands. I'm going to put this on you now. Is that okay? The horse lowered his head. A gasp went through the crowd. Slowly, carefully, Olivia slipped the bridle over his ears. He accepted it without resistance. Good boy. She breathed. Now the hard part. She positioned herself at his side, one hand on his mane, the other on his back. She could feel his muscles coiled beneath her palm, ready to explode at any moment. I trust you. She whispered. Do you trust me? In one fluid motion, she swung herself onto his back. The world held its breath. Midnight Storm stood perfectly still. Then, slowly, he began to walk. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she guided the horse around the paddock. Walk, then trot, then canter. It wasn't perfect. There were moments when he balked, moments when old fear flashed in his eyes. But each time, she waited, breathed, and let him work through it. After 20 minutes, she slowed him to a stop in front of where Marcus stood. How? He asked, his own eyes suspiciously bright. I didn't make him do anything. Olivia said. I just asked. And I waited for him to say yes. Marcus reached up and took her hand, helping her dismount. He didn't let go immediately. You're extraordinary. He said. You know that? I'm starting to believe it. She admitted. From that day forward, everything changed. Midnight Storm became Olivia's horse. Not officially, but in every way that mattered. She rode him every day, and with each ride, more of his old spirit returned. The ranch hands started calling him Stormy instead of that devil horse. Even Jake was caught once feeding him carrots, but the biggest change was in Marcus. The cold, distant rancher began to thaw. He smiled more. He laughed, actually laughed, at dinner. He started joining Olivia on morning rides, keeping a respectful distance from Stormy but close enough to talk. They talked about everything. About his brother James, who had been the kind one, the one everyone loved. About his ex-wife Elena, who had left because she couldn't compete with a ghost. About his fears of vulnerability, of losing someone else he cared about, and Olivia talked about David. About the slow erosion of her self-worth. About the years of gaslighting and control. About the day she finally found the courage to walk away with nothing but her life. He didn't deserve you. Marcus said one evening, as they watched the sunset from a ridge overlooking the ranch. No one who truly loved you would try to make you small. I know that now. Olivia said. But for a long time I believed everything he said. That I was worthless. That I was lucky anyone wanted me at all. You're worth more than he could ever understand. Marcus turned to face her. Olivia, I know you're still healing. I know you need time. But I want you to know. I'm not going anywhere. However long it takes, I'll wait. She looked at him, this man who had been as broken as she was, who was learning to open up just as she was learning to trust again. What if we're both too damaged? She asked. What if we just end up hurting each other? Then at least we'll have tried. He reached out and touched her face, gentle as a whisper. I'd rather have something real that might fail than nothing safe that's guaranteed to be empty. Olivia leaned into his touch. I'm scared. Me too. He admitted. But I'm more scared of never knowing what this could be. She smiled, the first truly unguarded smile she'd given anyone in years. Then I guess we're doing this. He kissed her then, soft and tentative, under a Montana sky streaked with gold and pink. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Olivia felt hope. 6 months later, Blackwood Ranch hosted an event that would become legend in the local community. Olivia had transformed the annual ranch celebration into a charity fundraiser for domestic violence survivors. She had contacted shelters, organized transportation, and created a day where women escaping situations like hers could come and experience something magical. 23 women arrived that morning, some with children, all with haunted eyes that Olivia recognized all too well. Welcome, she said, standing before them in her now comfortable boots and worn jeans. My name is Olivia, and a year ago, I was exactly where you are. Broken. Scared. Convinced I would never be whole again. She gestured at the ranch around them. This place taught me something important. It taught me that strength isn't about never being hurt. It's about getting up every time you're knocked down. It's about finding the courage to trust again, even when every instinct screams at you to run. She whistled, and Midnight Storm came trotting over from the paddock, as gentle as a lamb. This horse was broken too. She continued, stroking his neck. He lost someone he loved, and his pain turned into rage. Everyone said he was dangerous, that he couldn't be saved. But all he really needed was someone who was patient enough to see past the fear to the heart underneath. She looked at the women, seeing herself in their eyes. You are not broken, she said firmly. You are not worthless. You are survivors. And today, we're going to take the first step toward remembering who you really are. The day was filled with laughter and tears, with horseback rides and ranch activities, with conversations that started hesitant and grew into confessions and connections. By evening, something had shifted. The women who had arrived with shoulders hunched in protection were standing taller. The children who had clung to their mothers were running through the fields with the ranch dogs. Marcus found Olivia at the edge of the gathering, watching it all with tears in her eyes. You did this, he said, putting his arm around her. You created something incredible. We did this, she corrected. I couldn't have done any of it without you. Without this place. The place is just land, Marcus said. You're the one who gave it meaning. She leaned against him, feeling his strength, his steadiness, his love. I was so scared when I came here, she admitted. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had lost everything that I thought defined me. My career, my money, my confidence. Everything. And now? She smiled. Now I know that those things never defined me. They were just masks. What defines me is what I do when the masks are stripped away. How I treat people. How I get up after I fall. How I choose to love even when it's terrifying. Marcus kissed the top of her head. I love you, Olivia Chen. It was the first time either of them had said it. She felt the words settle into her heart, warm and true. I love you too, Marcus Blackwood, she replied. Even though you made me shovel horse manure on my first day. He laughed. I'm never going to live that down, am I? Never, she confirmed. But I forgive you. They stood together, watching the sun set on a day that had changed lives. 1 year later, Olivia stood in the same paddock where she had first touched Midnight Storm's nose. But today, the paddock was decorated with flowers, and the guests weren't ranch hands. It was her wedding day. Marcus waited for her at the altar they'd built from reclaimed barn wood. Jake stood beside him as best man, his weathered face soft with emotion. Rosa was in the front row, already crying into her handkerchief, and Olivia walked down the aisle not with her father, who had never understood her choices, but with Midnight Storm at her side. The horse that everyone said couldn't be tamed, wearing a garland of wildflowers, walking as calmly as if he'd done this 100 times. When she reached Marcus, she handed Stormy's lead to one of the ranch hands and took her future husband's hands in hers. You know, she whispered. A year ago, you told me that horse would kill me before sunset. Marcus grinned. I've been wrong before. You've been wrong a lot, she teased. But you got one thing right. What's that? You hired me. She squeezed his hands. Even though every instinct told you I would fail. You gave me a chance. Best decision I ever made, he replied. Well, second best. What was the first? Asking you to marry me. The ceremony was simple and perfect. They exchanged vows they'd written themselves, promising to be patient when the other was struggling, to be present when the other was hurting, to choose each other every day not because it was easy, but because love was worth the effort. At the reception, Olivia gave a speech that left no eye dry. When I came to Blackwood Ranch, I was running from my past. I thought if I could just get far enough away, I could outrun the pain, the fear, the shame. But you can't outrun what's inside you. Eventually, you have to stop and face it. She looked at Marcus, at the ranch hands who had become family, at the survivors from the shelter program who had come to celebrate. This place taught me that facing your pain isn't the end. It's the beginning. It's where healing starts. And it doesn't happen alone. It happens in community, in connection, in the courage to let people see you when you're at your worst. She raised her glass. To second chances. To unexpected families. And to the horses who teach us that even the most broken spirits can learn to trust again. The crowd cheered, glasses clinked, and the celebration continued long into the Montana night. Years later, the Blackwood Ranch had become famous for two things. The first was its horse rehabilitation program, which Olivia had developed into a nationally recognized model for working with traumatized animals. Horses that other ranches had given up on were brought to Blackwood, where Olivia and her team used patience and gentleness to help them heal. The second was the Survivor program, which had grown from that first charity event into a year-round sanctuary. Women escaping domestic violence could come to the ranch for anywhere from a week to 6 months, working with horses, learning new skills, and rebuilding their sense of self. Olivia often thought about how different her life might have been if she hadn't seen that job posting. If she hadn't been desperate enough to apply for something so far outside her comfort zone. If she hadn't met Marcus, or Midnight Storm, or Rosa, or Jake, but she had. And that had made all the difference. One morning, she was sitting on the porch of the house she now shared with Marcus, watching their 3-year-old daughter, Elena Rose, chase chickens around the yard. Midnight Storm grazed nearby, now an old horse with gray in his muzzle but still her closest companion. Marcus came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat beside her. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that first day." She smiled. "When you looked at my Louboutins and asked if it was a joke." To be fair, they were very impractical. They were. She agreed. But I wore them because they were the only armor I had left. They were the last piece of the person I used to be, or the person I thought I had to be. And now? She looked down at her worn boots, at her calloused hands, at the life she had built from the ruins of who she used to be. "Now I don't need armor," she said. "Now I have something better." "What's that?" "Home." She leaned over and kissed him. "I have home." Marcus smiled, that smile that still made her heart flutter after all these years. "You know what the best part is?" he asked. "What?" "You tamed the horse no one could ride. But really, you tamed something much more impossible." "What's that?" He touched his chest. "This old, stubborn, terrified heart." Olivia laughed, wrapping her arms around him. "I didn't tame it," she corrected. "I just loved it until it remembered how to love back." And that, she thought, was the secret to everything. Not forcing. Not controlling. Not demanding, just loving. Just showing up. Just being patient enough for broken things to heal. Elena Rose came running up, covered in mud and chicken feathers, and climbed into her parents' laps. "Mama, when can I ride Stormy?" she asked. Olivia looked at the old horse, who had lifted his head at the sound of his name. "Soon, baby," she promised. "When you're a little bigger and he decides he's ready." "How will I know when he's ready?" Olivia smiled, remembering her own journey. Remembering sitting outside that paddock day after day, asking nothing, expecting nothing, just being present. "You'll know," she said. "Because he'll tell you. You just have to listen." And somewhere in the distance, Midnight Storm whinnied almost as if he was agreeing.